one shows since June 22nd here at the Four Corners Project.org studio in Beit Shemesh, Israel. And it is an unbelievable show, a show that I never in a million years thought that I would be doing, because we have a legend in the studio tonight. A legend. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have probably undisputable, the most famous Jewish radio personality on the internet and on the radio in all of Jewish music and media. Welcome, Nachum Segal.
Thank you, King of Shlock, Lenny Solomon. It is amazing to be in the presence of the king, and I see the king has quite a castle over there in his main studio. My gosh, it's befitting royalty, that setup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, I got to tell you that, we go back such a long way, and this show is the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame show because you are the 51st inductee into the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame. Now, some people might say, Lenny, you waited 51 until you put Nachum in the Hall of Fame, into the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame?
That's what all my fans were saying. What's going on that we waited all the way into the 50s?
So the truth of the matter is that they're 100% right. It is on me. It is my bad. But I will tell you that in my defense, the first 50 people there was absolutely no broadcasters. There were no Jewish radio personalities. There was no, and you are the first. And so it is very, very fitting that you lead the class, the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame class of 2021, into the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame.
Nice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know if we have a similar situation like Cooperstown, that we're not going to be opening up to the public for the induction, but I hope that you're waiting till post-COVID to have this celebration, so all of my zillions of fans will make the trek up to upstate New York. Is that where it is, by the way? Is the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame also situated in Cooperstown, New York?
We're actually looking for a property now to build the museum.
You mean it's not right behind that wall in back of you?
It could be. It very well could be. By the time, listen, all I can tell you is that this is my 101st show since June 22nd. In a time that I, basically reinvented myself, because I figured there's not going to be any live performances for a while.
Right.
And I'm going to ask you, because you have done, do you have a count of how many shows you have done?
Well, JM and the AM, the daily morning show that I do, is over 9,000 at this point.
Right.
Matas Weingast keeps a really, really good guesstimate on the number of JMAs I've done. But then, there have been other iterations of shows that I've done in my career, whether they be daily or weekly, in the thousands, thank God. So I don't know exactly where we're at, but I'd have to assume at this point we are, well into the, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 range, I would hope.
And so my question to you is, how do you do it? Every single day, getting up, having to do 3-4 hours on the radio.
I never considered that. It's outrageous. I'm going to stop this ridiculous habit. I mean, come on.
Don't. Breaking news.
Look,
convinces Nachum to stop.
Look, here's the bottom line, and you can relate to this. I feel like I'm speaking to someone who's passionate about what he does, someone who understands how important the work that he does is vis-a-vis the Jewish world, Jewish education, Jewish spirit, Jewish pride. I take this very seriously. I enjoy using a medium that I'm pretty good at to talk about Jewish values and to herald wonderful things in our community and to remind people about important things they should keep in mind. And it's been amazing. And I don't know about how do I do it, because the hours are long and early and sometimes difficult. But frankly, as I always say, I'm one of those people that's lucky to never have worked a day in his life. And when I'm getting up at 4 a.m., and these days it really is a real 4 a.m., and I'm in the studio now usually at some point between 5 and 5:30. It's just, it's no burden. It seems wonderful. I don't know if I jump out of bed at this age, but I am, certainly sprinting my way through the morning to get to the studio as soon as possible. It's an amazing feeling. Those who unfortunately don't have that type of life or work life, unfortunately can't relate to it. Those of us who are lucky enough to be in this position, we don't take it for granted, and we are just thrilled to have this type of situation.
I 100% agree. I just 100%. It's the best. So what I want to do now is I want to take us back to the beginning for me and you, because A week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I interviewed, before Pesach, I interviewed Shlomi Ash.
Right.
And we talked about a chevra of people, Bobby Shubowitz, Shmuel Wasserman, Oliver Shalom, Jordan Hirsch, Jonathan Rimberg, Avrami Weisberger, Avi Feinberg, Tzvi Pill, Mark Infield, myself, and you. And we were all the same chevra. We're about the same age, give or take 3-4 years. And we all went into Jewish music, Jewish media, right? And
sure.
It's really quite an unbelievable thing. And I told Shlomi, I said, I think it skipped a generation. Like now there are people in it also who are getting in it and going into it full time. And we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to go back to 1984. 1984, I believe you're at YUR because that's where I believe our first interview was.
First interview was definitely there. Already I was working at WFMU at that point, but for sure the first interview was at WYUR, the YU radio station. And I guess if I've become a good interviewer, I owe it to people like you who allowed me to hone my skills when I was a raw radio announcer.
Well, believe me, my skills needed to be honed at that point also. But that was when we released Kesher 1. Kesher 1 came out in March of 84. And I remember coming to the studio. It was 11 p.m. at night.
Right.
It had to be around 11 p.m.
Yeah, it was actually on from 10 to 11, right? Maybe
10
even
to
10
11.
to midnight. Yeah, maybe 10 to midnight even.
Yeah.
Look, and we had a lot of fun. But you want to know what I remember about that era specifically? I remember, and talk about it's funny because, it was Pesach recently, so we were doing a whole thing on the air about Great Adventure, about Six Flags. I remember Kesher at Great Adventure 1984.
Yep.
And I had the privilege of announcing you guys. I don't know if you remember, I was actually the MC of the event. It wasn't an event. It was more like, Kesher will be playing at 2:00 in this area of the park. Everyone come. It was indoors. I don't know if you remember. It was indoors in this big bubble. And it was just spectacular. People of all ages were so receptive to what you were doing. And I felt at that time, and I was so glad to, be the voice that brought you on stage. And I felt at that time, even though, again, I was relatively young, but it seemed to me like there was some type of, I don't want to say revolution, but some type of turning point in Jewish music around that era. I think it was an era when younger people started to become listeners of Jewish music. It was not the WEVD. I'm listening to old, Chazanish records. With my grandmother. In the 80s, it became somewhat of a different feeling when someone was surrounded by Jewish music, and I think that was really again. Indicative of that time. The early 80s was a very significant time in the timeline of Jewish music development. And I think that that's one of the reasons that people like myself and you and others, whether it be full-time or part-time, really dove into the industry. And if you want to analyze it, and this is something I mentioned in almost every interview, one of my proudest moments is when Mrs. Newman of blessed memory, who led Berea High School, said that she credited me with making it cool for high school kids to listen to Jewish music. Now, I don't know if it's me, you, all of us together. I'm sure everyone gets some credit. But the fact that in an era in the 1970s where I was not listening to Jewish music in high school, and I was a regular frum kid, but I was not listening to Jewish music. I know what to sing. I know what to sing at a kumsitz, but I wasn't listening to Jewish music.
No.
I think once the 80s showed up, all of a sudden people in a younger demographic felt that their spare music time, part of it would be spent with Jewish music. And that was a really important era.
It's unbelievable because I actually remember that when I broke in to the industry, who did you have? You had MBD and Avram Fried. You had the Miami Boys Choir. You had Safam.
Right, but Miami also, if you think about it, was really with us in that big turning point. You had Kalbach, the Rabbi's Sons. You had legends like Baruch Chait and Avi Rottenberg writing music. But even when you look at Dveikus, who had an amazing run in the early 70s with a couple of albums, they picked it up when you got to 80, 81, 82. Even they, saw that there was interest again, and they released Dveikus 3, 4, 5, eventually 6. And I think that's significant that even acts that were sort of in a lull, that notice that, hey, people are paying attention to Jewish music. Why not go for it? Let's put out some more material out there to revive what we're doing. Again, those who are doing it as a business, those who are doing it as a hobby. I know there's a difference, but I think but I think on both tracks, there were people in the 1980s who were noticing that, boy, more and more age groups were paying attention to Jewish music.
So when I put out Kesher 1, it was at that point that I knew that I wasn't going to be an accountant full time, right? That I was going to be doing music full time. There was nothing that we could do about it. In other words, I had started accounting after Queens College, 82 to 85, and then, but by the first year already, I wanted to be a full time musician. And when I put out that first Kesher album, that was it for me. We were never going back. So when did you know that this would be your career?
That's such a good question. I'm still waiting. For it to become my career. When did I know it would be my career? I mean, I think on paper, it was obvious that once I started filling my day with other radio projects other than my morning show, then it was obvious that this was my career. And that happened around 1992, 1993, when I sort of put my camp career, in the background and moved into what I would call, at that time, full-time radio. So that's when it was on paper. I think instinctively, though, I always felt that it had to be, the backbone of what I'd be doing, whether I pursued something else in Jewish life, whether I pursued something else in professional life, whatever it might be. I always thought that I'd have to wake up in the morning and do this. It was something I had to do. So I think, unofficially or informally, I would say I already knew early on. But formally, I think once we got to the early 90s and I really just started to, dominate my schedule with as many radio projects as possible, I think that's when I realized, okay, this is what I'm in. It reminds me, I think it was Bill Fitch, the famous NBA basketball coach.
Right.
They once asked him the same question. How'd you know you'd be doing this for your life? And he said something like, well, I was an apprentice for a plumber, and on the side, I was a high school basketball coach, and then I got a job as an assistant in college. I became a college coach. I assisted in the pros. And the next thing I knew, I'd coach 5,000 NBA games,
Oh, man.
It sort of feels like that, like I did things day by day, and all of a sudden I look back and, I'm doing the same thing for 38 years. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. So you're actually on 38 years, and I'm on 30. Well, actually, I'd be 38 also. I just didn't put out an album until 36 years ago.
So it's funny because until this conversation never hit me that as much as you're known for Shlock rock, the truth is you made a decision to go into Jewish music before Shlock rock dominated your music experience, which is funny.
Shlock rock was so unplanned, I must tell you. It was not. I did it as a joke. I did it as comedy.
Well, there was a Shlock rock song on Kesher 1, but
that's right.
Yeah.
And hit me with your
which I assume
shot.
you wrote. Yeah, I assume you wrote that song.
Yes, yes. And what happened was,
if that wouldn't have been on the first Kesher, I wonder if there would have been a Shlock rock. Like that showed that was a very popular, parody, and it showed the Jewish world that they're into that kind of thing, to sort of poke fun at, at an important part of Jewish life.
Well, remember, there was Country Yossi, there was the Rechnitzer Rejects.
Right. Seymour Rock off of Blessed Memory.
And I was a little bit somech on them. I always say that I built my Shlock rock career on them. I never even asked permission to do songs. And remember, I know you must have gotten this, but my big the two questions that people always ask me was, do you need permission? And the second one, so you make a living from this?
Right.
That was the main question. Right. So you make
a living. It's amazing. All of a sudden, every Jew really became a lawyer. They had to make sure you were following the law in the industry that you were involved with.
So
now that I look back at that, it was so ridiculous. But anyway.
But we've never gotten into trouble. B'li ayin hara.
Yeah, because you did it right. And people never wanted to believe you were doing it right, but you were always doing it right. So. But, nobody in our community believed that that's actually the case.
So, let's switch. What's the word? Let's switch
gears. Let's switch gears, Mr. Solomon.
Let's switch gears and go to sports.
Yeah.
Go to sports because me and you have this connection going back to August 27th, 1972.
Right. Now, this is doubleheader.
Yes.
This is a doubleheader that ended up being, I mean, I know that this is ridiculous to do here, but it's a doubleheader that ended, a Yankee doubleheader that ended up being if I'm right, it was a 1 p.m. start, and the second game ended around 9-10 p.m. Does that make sense?
I think it ended at 11.
And you were there. See,
I for every inning.
Yes.
My mother.
Right. I remember this.
Oh, my. My mother yelled at my dad.
we were watching it on TV, and it was a malacha to watch that whole doubleheader on television. And which Yankee, of course, was the name from that doubleheader?
Well,
Who was the name?
That was Johnny Callison, right?
Johnny Callison.
Johnny Callison. I looked it up before I went on. This is my research. That I looked it up.
Callison won both games, I think.
We have that in common, the Yankees, and of course we have the Rangers in common.
Right.
But we also, which is unbelievable, which is more important than the Rangers and the Yankees, is the YU Maccabees.
That's right.
And last year I came in. I found it more important to go to 2 YU Mac games than to go to a Ranger game.
I agree with you on that.
Because there was no better Jewish pride. There was no better Kiddush Hashem than watching that team play.
Correct.
You know,
they made us very proud in an arena that, you know, we don't usually exude pride from.
Right.
They
How
made
many
us
years have you been going to games? I mean, you told me you used to go to every one.
Well, I remember being at a YU game in 1982. But I also think I was at 1 or 2 when Dave Kufeld was playing when I was a teenager, I think. So we're going back, to the late 70s, early 80s. And I always joke with my kids that I was there when nobody was in the stands. And then they remember being there when nobody was in the stands, And even Gavri, my youngest, remembers being there when nobody was in the stands. And now all of a sudden, everybody's on the bandwagon.
and everybody's on it. I mean, that was... it was unbelievable. It just was such a great year last year. And I actually was with you for both of those games. The one game we went to was the game that Gabe Leifer hit that 3-point shot with 2 seconds to go or with 6 seconds to go, where they almost lost and they had just been ranked.
Oh, yeah.
But it was just amazing. And then the other game I went to, they won by 40. It was in
St. Joseph's?
It was it could be. It was a home game. The one that they won by 40 was a home game. It wasn't even close.
On the first one, it was literally a trap game. I mean, they had just been, ranked, and I'm telling you, it was your classic trap situation. Any sports fan would know what I mean by that. And because of Gabe Leifer, as you say, they escaped to the victory.
So here's the question. I don't think anybody's probably asked you this question, but maybe. So in all I would imagine that you grew up listening to Marv Albert, doing Knick games and doing Ranger games under your pillow.
Right, of course.
Because I did. I had to go to sleep by a certain time, but I would smuggle the transistor radio underneath my pillow, and I would listen to Marv Albert. They were playing the Kings. It was in L.A. And I once said that I wanted to be a sports announcer. Of course, before that, I wanted to be a hockey player. That was but then I had this dream that every time I put skates on, the skates would melt. And I knew that was a sign from Hashem that I would never be a hockey player. So then I started thinking about sports announcing, but I never even, I never pursued it. It was music. Everything for me was music from 8 years old. But did you ever think about, because people always ask me, Lenny, why didn't you go into secular music? Why did you pick Jewish music, right? And so did you ever think about being a radio announcer or to, either doing news or doing sports?
Well, I mean, yeah, I did think of the news aspect and, trying to be a news reader, which as I get older, I realize is almost a pointless job, especially in this generation. Sports wise, I don't think I ever looked at myself as someone good enough to be a hockey announcer, even a basketball announcer. I certainly didn't know enough about the game, even though I'm a fan. But my kids, one of them is a real sports announcer. He does the MAC games and does very well at it.
Yeah.
And my kids, for some reason, really know the sports well. They know the intricacies. They know strategies and all that. And that was never really my forte, especially in basketball and hockey. Maybe in baseball, I could have done that. So I don't know. I never really thought in that direction in terms of, and frankly, as I've said many times, and a lot of people don't get this, but even years ago, when I had a younger family and craving to make a real living, if someone said to me, here's millions of dollars to be a newsreader every night, give up what you're doing, I don't know if I would have done it. I don't know if I would have taken the job. Now, most people, of course, are probably watching this going, what? Are you out of your mind? You were offered $3 million by ABC to be their World News Tonight anchor. You wouldn't do that instead of, JM in the AM. It would be a real serious question. I'd have to think long and hard before agreeing.
$3 million. I never thought about $3 million. Wow.
Whatever it is, a salary where you don't have to worry. The next day it can be whatever. It can be $200,000 for somebody. It can be anything. But if someone offered me, a job like that, with all the notoriety and the way that the fame and everything that comes along with it, I don't know if I would give up what I'm doing now. That's how much I love what I'm doing.
Yes, and I also think Hashem set it up that this is what we would be doing. In other words, when we talk about Shlock Rock was the last thing I expected was to do 2 Shlock Rock albums. Now we're up to 39. And I never expected to do,
you still never did my idea.
What?
You still never went ahead and recorded my idea.
Tell me your idea again.
What was the only suggestion I ever gave you in the history of Shlock Rock?
I don't remember.
And you should do High School Musical.
Oh, yes. I started working on it.
I remember, but it never materialized, right?
Oh, you're talking about the entire musical?
Right.
Take the entire...
Right, the popular songs that all the kids loved. I thought it would bring Shlock Rock to an even younger generation at that point. Although, frankly, with your My Menorah and Minion Man, I don't know if you can get to a younger generation than that. It seems like every generation is addicted to those songs.
Well, Minion Man has transcended Shlock Rock to the point where people don't even 100% know that it's ours.
Correct.
Minion Man is that's.
But I got to tell you something about God setting things up. If you don't mind me interrupting, I'm sorry.
No, please.
I have a friend, a really close friend that I know for a long, long time, who, if he wasn't Orthodox, would for sure be some type of announcer for a professional sports team. There's no doubt in my mind. And things didn't get set up for him. He had to make a serious decision. Am I continuing to pursue this dream of being a sports announcer? And again, it's somebody who could have done it and would have excelled at it. Or do I, stop it now and go into some other line of work just so I can remain faithful to my faith? And he made the right decision, the latter decision, which was the right decision. Right. So I don't know if God always sets it up. I think everybody is afflicted with serious tests along their career, especially tests that involve Shabbos, not just kashrus and things like that. So it's not always set up perfectly. I think in our cases, for whatever reason, God had Rahmanas on us and literally just schlepped us along the paths that he had in mind.
Yes, he did. And now that as I get older, the question is, how do you continue and do you move up and groom somebody younger to come in? People have always said to me, you got to get the next King of Shlock. You got to groom the next
Prince of Shlock, please.
The Prince of Shlock, of course. Or the King of Shlock Emeritus. I'd become the King of Shlock Emeritus. But I don't know. I still got that, energy. Although I'm kind of a little bit off on parodies right now, even though I'm working on 3 albums now at the same time, including 1 parody album. I have to just put my mind to it and get it going. But okay, I want to ask you about politics. Greatest interview you ever did?
Greatest interview? I'm not sure what you mean. I guess one that you wanted to do. There's no political interview or an interview with a government official that would make my top 10 list of interviews. Because generally speaking, if I'm interviewing a government official, it's an opportunity for them to make statements to the Jewish world, which I respect.
Right.
I'm not going to, very rarely am I going to take them on. I guess, that's not true. I would guess my favorite political interview would have been the one in 2010 with Chuck Schumer, because that was the one cited by Politico and other news sources where he took on President Obama regarding his opinion about Israel. So I guess that would be the in fact, that year at the Celebrate Israel parade, he came over to me, the senator, and he said, Nachum Segal, I made you famous. Now you make me famous, as a joke, because he saw that it was through my show that it became such an issue. Of course, 10 years later, unfortunately, Senator Schumer is not making statements like that anymore regarding Israel. It's a separate issue. But that may have been my favorite only because of the attention it got and because it really was my opportunity to challenge the president without even challenging him. I had a guest do it. on Israel. Other favorite ones.
So let me give you an example.
I always cite my conversations with Rabbi Steinsaltz of blessed memory.
Yes.
I once I always like that when people ask me about my favorite questions I ever asked a guest. And Rabbi Natan Slifkin was a guest of mine once, and I thought I asked them what was really a good question for my audience. I always try to find the question that people aren't really thinking about. I asked them because he's those of you who don't know, he's the zoo rabbi, knows a lot about animals, etc. I asked them what is the most Jewish animal? Not a kosher animal necessarily, but what's the most Jewish animal? And it was his answer that validated just how good my question was, but his answer was brilliant. He said the most Jewish animal is the mama bear, the way she takes care of her cubs. And I was like, wow, that is a great one. And then, of course, I always like the interviews where someone's going to make a statement that really is appealing to my audience and not necessarily others. When Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots was on because he was being honored by Yeshiva University, he made the statement to my audience, and of course he would never say this anywhere else. He said if his father was alive, he would be even happier that I am being honored by Yeshiva University than he would be by all my Super Bowl victories. And I thought that for my audience, that was tremendous. And of course,
amazing. It's an amazing.
It is an amazing thing. So that wasn't prompted by a question, but again, you asked about favorite interviews. Those would be the ones that either are directed, the ones that reveal material that would only be appreciated by my audience. I love those, and the ones where people use the opportunity to say something they would never say anywhere else. I like those as well.
Yeah. I once had a situation. I'll tell you a quick story. 1988, J.J. Greenberg, Oliver Shalom, takes me to the Jesselsons for Shabbos. And they tell me, in Israel, and they tell me, and I hadn't made Aliyah yet. I was still single. I was 27. I was still single.
This is at the Plaza, I assume?
No, it's at their house in Baka, in the German colony. Right. And they come in, they go, Lenny, they tell J.J., we're going to give you the upstairs room because Natan and Avital are going to be... And I spent Shabbos with the Sharanskys after he had just gotten out.
Wow, great.
And so I'm in shul, and they give me Hagba for 800-pound sefer, and they give Natan Sharansky Galila.
Wow!
And I do Hagba, and I'm dying. I mean, it's so heavy, and they're going, Natan, do this, Natan, do that. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I don't know how I'm going to hold on. Now, did you ever interview Natan Sharansky? Have you
more than once? In fact, there was a famous episode where my manager Miriam Wallach tackled him in Ben Gurion Airport after one of the Nefesh B'Nefesh flights. We can get him on live on the air. We've spoken to him more than once on the air, and one of the greatest moments of my career, frankly, was at the 40th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. 40 or 50? Must have been 50. 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem in Jerusalem, where we were with Mizrahi. They gave me the honor of emceeing their final event. And at the final event, in addition to others, were Natan Sharansky and the three soldiers from the iconic photograph at the Kotel.
From
1967. Wow. And they are on stage together. And I am saying to myself, as I'm introducing all of them, I'm saying to myself, when he was in the Soviet Union and in the Gulag, he and millions of other Jews held on to the dream of Jerusalem and Israel because of that photograph. I could only imagine how many Jews in the Soviet Union only knew of Jerusalem from that photograph that went around the world, the three soldiers in front of the Western Wall during the 6-Day War. And I'm saying that, and sure enough, as he is brought onto the stage to meet the three of them, it is obvious from the way he's reacting that these three gentlemen, who were young paratroopers, of course, in 1967, were so meaningful to him and millions of other Soviet Jews in terms of being connected to Jerusalem and Israel. And that, for me, was a great moment.
But also, you're in the middle of history. I mean, you've got these four people that were like historical icons.
Yep. No question about it.
I mean, the person today would be Jonathan Pollard. I guess, right. He's now in Israel. We'll see what happens with him in terms of what he does. If he goes into, I don't think he's going to go into politics. I think he's going to kind of stay in his apartment and enjoy living. I don't know.
If he's smart.
If he's smart. Certainly with what's going on here right now, I got to tell you.
I can't imagine that Natan Sharansky doesn't regret going into politics, but who knows?
Okay, so we're almost at the end of our show. We're at the 30-minute mark. I just want to close. I want to close talking about Shlock Rock and Nachum Segal, and specifically how much you played us through the years. And I just want to know the $64,000 question, and we actually discussed this many times. How much pushback did you get for playing us?
The first one off Kesher was a lot of pushback. People were very uncomfortable with the whole, how do you poke fun at the Jewish institution of basically giving a shiur, right? That's what it's about, in terms of a Rebbe and the
right. It was a rebellious kid saying, "I'm going to show you." Yeah,
right. And then I remember there was another one. Remember the Yeatles?
Yeah, of course.
So the Yeatles, they had a song. I think it was Rabbi something's magical something shiur. I forgot what it was. And that also, that drove people nuts. How dare you put something Jewish themed to a Beatles song? The whole routine. By the way, your Shabbat in Liverpool comes out 40 years ago. They'd stone you. I mean,
I know.
Are you kidding me?
I know.
Now it's very different, obviously, and people are used to a variety of content, to say the least. There's probably a better way of saying that.
So it's unbelievable. Yeah.
But we played a lot of Shlock Rock, got criticized for plenty of it, but very proud of it,
you
frankly.
Stood strong, and you were one of the reasons that I think you're one of the reasons that we ended up going to all 50 states, because people
thank
would listen.
you very much. I appreciate it. It's for that reason that I'll be entering the Hall of Fame with a Shlock Rock cap. You wonder which team will be on the cap of the Hall of Fame, or I will be going in with my Shlock Rock cap.
Oh, good. You notice I wore the Yankees for
you.
I wore
your
the Yankees
uniform, yeah.
Aaron Judge. I just want to close. I didn't do any paperwork for these 30 minutes, which of course is a big sin, which is that if you're watching from Facebook, leave a comment, give us a like. If you're watching from YouTube, subscribe and comment and like. And if you're watching from Twitter, retweet. And I just want to say that the Four Corners Project, which is our 501c3, the whole goal is informal Jewish education through music and media, and you have been a machine of informal Jewish education.
Oh, thank you.
To close out, any story come to mind of people saying how much they were affected by JM in the AM?
The only story that I could tell, there are a lot of them, thank God, but the one that comes to mind is the two people who the next day with their family were moving to Israel, and they came to my studio to give me a gift because they said that one of the reasons they are heading to Israel to live permanently is because of the influence of JM in the AM. That to me sums it all up, and thank God it's representative of a whole bunch of other stories.
And that brings us to this last statement, which is that today Israel finally announced that tourists, non-Israelis, will be allowed to come to Israel as long as they have first-degree relatives in Israel. They will be allowed to fly. So I'm going to put you on the spot. When's your next trip?
Well, we have one planned for May 26th. I hope it happens, like you just said, because we just have to make sure that both Israel and the United States allow it. If they do, we'll be there at the end of May, please God. First-degree relatives, I assume siblings counts, because I have three siblings in Israel. That should work. And look forward to seeing you, King of Shlock, in the Holy Land.
It'll be a pleasure. My next trip to New York, I don't know when it's going to be. It might be in June. I think there's a good chance I'll be there in August, maybe. I don't know. This is the weirdest time for me. I've traveled 6 days in the last 18 months.
Let's get back on the road, baby. East to west and west to east.
Eitan G would be very happy with that. I'll tell you that. He wants to go on the road very badly.
Amen.
But I want to thank you, Nachum, for coming on Lenny Solomon Live Show 101.
Woo!
And it is a pleasure to have you. And for everybody out there, go to shlockrock.com, go to About, and you'll see the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame menu drop down, and you'll scroll down to see Nachum Segal entry in the Shlock Rock Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Lenny.
It's my pleasure. Everybody out there, Thursday night, next show, 11 p.m., Israel time, 4 p.m., New York. We'll see you then. Keep on shlocking.